So on this one, we're going to hop into design. So design, we won't have to spend a lot of time in. I think there's a lot of good resources out there for design. And personally, the reason I won't spend a lot of time in design is because design is going to be one of the more fun parts of the process. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to end up being, right, the greatest designer out there, but I'm going to keep it real with you. I think design is going to be more for websites than your B2B SaaS application, or even if it's, just your general consumer app, right? That it's going to rely more so on the workflow and functionality, and does it do what it's supposed to do in the most efficient way possible. However, and I will say, not to knock all these other players or whatnot, but like I said, I've been in sales for over 20 years. I've led a bunch of sales teams. I've been responsible for procuring sales software for years now. So I've seen and handled everything. And I'm fairly confident to say, like, from a design standpoint, what most people will be able to just sit down and do from an AI assisted coding standpoint, it'll get the job done in comparison to the competitors. There's not much to fret about out there. So I don't want to sound cocky in that perspective, but I do want to just be honest and real about it. I think design is fun. You're going to have to protect your time from designing, because you can get stuck there when really you need to be out there trying to generate revenue and marketing yourself, period. However, to save your time on some design concepts, you're going to want to get familiar with playing around with hex codes. Hex codes are super cool. They're essentially the numeric breakdown for color configuration. You can find it in video games. You can find it everywhere. Really, you could just take a hex code into Google itself, put in that specific hex code, and then you can even toy with it right then and there to figure out different variations of that color. Then you could just simply paste it back into your code base and have that color. So I prefer hex codes. Hex codes I find to be the easiest to use. Sections. I do want you to get familiar with understanding the spacing behind a page when designing a page, right? You can really configure a page down to grid-like level breakdowns, and also understand that there's not a single part of the page that you cannot use. It's going to trip you out at first as a first-time developer. Like, oh, am I allowed to be over here? Am I allowed to? Yes, you can use all of it, right? So get very, very familiar with your spacing. Understand the width protocols, the height protocols, right? You're going to test it out a lot on your local host. However you set up your local host, you're going to test it out and see it, right? And you're going to check it out on your mobile as well, right? You're going to have to understand spacing from the lens of, right, I want my page to scroll, right? Or I don't want it to scroll in this direction. So maybe we're going to take off overflow, or we're going to leave that in, right? Concepts like that you're going to come to, but that's just going to come from, I'm going to be straightforward with you. You'll get that with the large language model. You're going to tell it, like, hey, I need this to scroll more, right? And it's going to tell you, okay, well, yeah, add overflow here, right? And now you got it, or whatever it's going to tell you to add. So just understand spacing in particular. You can use all of the spacing, and you can use it how you want to use it. You can set up the sticky configurations, all of that. One thing that you're going to have to decide on is, do you want to create a complementary CSS file, or are you going to want to do things inline, right? So a CSS file is going to be, for example, you will have your general code configuration file for, let's say, a certain page, and that page is going to say, okay, blah, 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 JS. You might have that same page. So let's say home JS, but then all of the styling for home.js will call back to home.css. You can do it like that. A lot of times it's easier to work through that way, because now you can go exactly to the file itself and say, okay, I want to change this, I want to change this. You know where your styles live. Or you can do it inline. Inline works just as well. I started off doing inline myself. I eventually moved over to CSS because my inline files just got way too large, and I wanted to condense down the file size. So I went towards CSS eventually, but both work just the same. So you'll just make a decision there. And then, so modularization, that's what I'm talking about, from the sense of when your files become too big, right? You're going to want to modularize those files, organize them, understand everything is ultimately sitting in that folder on your desktop, right? So you can think about the folder. Okay, how do I want things organized? I probably want all my components sitting in this file. I probably want all my hooks sitting here. I want all of my style sitting here. So I consider that part of the design of the app. I think that's more of an efficiency flow, but still, nonetheless, right? You're going to want to be efficient in your approach, maybe services file. So you're going to want everything to be where they should be, easy to retrieve. And then so you can draw back to them, whether you're troubleshooting or just designing, right? So you're going to have a folder just for your components. You're going to have a folder for your functions, all of that, right? And then the corresponding files underneath there. And that just makes maybe efficiency, design, but I figure I want to sneak that in there as well, just for modularization. I think it's important, right? You don't want a sloppy mess of an app. Maybe you work like that. Maybe you work like that. First time developer, you shouldn't work like that. Not until you get some real skills under your belt. So modularize, make everything efficient, organized. But that's all it is for design that I'm going to stay there. Like I said, there's more than enough information out there that you can find for design. You'll find it fun. It's cool because now you're really bringing the visuals to life for your app. I saved this for last because you do have to set up you should have the database in place, the logic and most of the coding before you even really worry about the design. I know it's going to trip you up because you're going to be looking at like a mess, but you just need to make sure that it works. Make sure it works, then clean it up. All right. Oh, font types, right? So this is where you're gonna want, I'll put it over here. So fonts, right? Font size, font design. So just think of like your Google Docs, right? How large do I want my font? What type of style do I want my font, right? I think the most common for web development is Enter. So you can kind of go from there, but there's so much to choose from. So design will come to you. I don't want to spend a bunch of time there because of that, you won't need too much guidance on. The large language model has you back there. Cool.